Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order of the City of Monona Plan Commission, December 10th, 2018.
Did you
Please
see
call
that?
the roll, please.
Chair Moore,
Here?
Dorschel,
Here.
Fox,
Here.
Thomas,
Here.
Stein,
Here.
Holmberg, here, Holmquist.
Here.
And Alder Spate has been excused. Approval of the minutes for November 12th, 2018. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So move.
Second? Second. Do we have any? Yes, Chris.
Page 4, right before F, the motion to recommend. The motion to recommend was I made the motion, Kathy seconded it. And then condition number 1 was as you had actually originally written it. It just got lost in the minutes. It was to remove the reference to fiber optic cement panels and allow SmartSide. But I don't see it anywhere in here. And then on page 6, we need to either, I thought we'd put in the findings of fact. You had a finding of fact number 3, which you left blank. I'm not sure if we left it in finding of fact or part of the condition, but was that we're considering the Yahara River as a third frontage, which is why we're allowing 3 signs for the 2 end caps, is because there's 2 street frontages plus the Yahara River frontage. So we made that a point of that one condition. It would seem to be more appropriate as a finding of fact, but it could be in the condition allowing the number 7, allowing the exception of the end cap tenants. I don't recall. I had it in my notes. I didn't write down if it was a finding of fact or part of that condition. Either way, it describes the condition and why we did it.
Okay, anything else, any other changes, amendments, alterations, no? All those in favor of accepting the minutes as amended?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is approved. We don't have anyone here for appearances, so we'll go right to unfinished business. Public hearing on request by Carl Sansness, thank you, PLS, and property owner Jim Whitehorse for approval of revised for lot CSM at 1208 East Broadway, Lot 2 of CSM 8819, case number 2-012-2018. Carl, please start by introducing yourself again, please.
I'm Carl Sansmith, professional land surveyor. I work for Royal Oak at 3678 Kinsman Boulevard, right here in Manson. And I represent the White Horses on their subdivision, or their certified survey down on Broadway. And I'm here because we had been requested to put a 30-foot no vehicle access on both sides of the entrance to this area. The east side, we don't find a problem because it's undeveloped yet, and they can design around that 30-foot. But on the west side with the gas station, the 30-foot would encroach so far into the building area and the parking area that it's undoable. We also talked to Corey about this issue, and he said we'll pull it back to the center of the canopy, which is only 3 feet, further, more space. We're still down to like 11th foot for entry for ingress egress coming out there with fuel trucks and everything else. So that was undoable. But the bigger issue is there is the rights of the gas station to use that triangle that was quick lane as ingress egress across the entire triangle piece. So we have to really satisfy their needs as well, and they're not going to approve 11-foot shift or closure on this property for vehicle access. In the meantime, we went out and did some survey work and measured up the buildings, the parking areas. which is in front of the building, the canopy, the pavement along for their parcel along the highway, because it's one big slab. And quickly design a possible option versus the 30-foot in, no vehicle access on that side of the road. Oh, you got it? Oh, you got it?
What do we call it? The,
Overhead projector.
I call it the overhead camera. Can we get the document projector, please? There you go.
Got it?
So,
Point to it,
Yeah.
or I'll see it.
so we measured up all this in here. Here's the canopy showing right here, including the pavement line down in this area. So we could figure out where the truck or the traffic area would be. And coming in this way, we're gonna need some room to do this. We felt that an island and 2 lanes going out on the exit would be appropriate, one going left and one going right. There'll be 3 lanes wide at the intersection instead of just 2. That'll help get traffic in and out of there. We brought this up a little bit. I don't know if, I'm not an engineer, so I don't know how far this should be. It should be looked at in the design process. But this would stop traffic from quickly going over this way. The only thing we have to worry about is the fuel truck and the back tires on that to make sure it can make that turn in without going up and over the curbing. So, but that's in the design anyhow. But I think this is a doable option instead of a 30-foot in this area. I'm trying to get you guys to approve that or some other option. I don't know any other way to doing this.
Is there anybody else here that would like to speak before we close the public hearing portion? And then we'll move to questions. No one else is here? Okay.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
My name's Ruth Ann Whitehorse. I'm part of the family that owns the property. And I guess I'm really asking for this CSM approval because this whole thing has been going on for 5 years. And we've got businesses or whatever wanting to purchase the property. But how can they purchase the property if they don't know what property they're buying? So that's why the CSM was being redone. So it's broken down into three lots, correct? 4 lots. So each of those lots can be sold. Previously, it was one big lot. And that was difficult. That was difficult to sell. I don't know, how many of you were on the board in 2014 of January? All of you, a number of you are new, right?
No,
I
I
know
see.
you were.
I think I was.
Yeah. Well, we had a developer come in wanting to buy a whole nother piece of property, which was my dad, Walter Whitehorse's property. But he was told, if you want that property, then Chief Auto Parts side would have to be sold too. And I don't understand how that could happen when you, let's say you have the Joneses and the Andersons side by side. Joneses wanted to sell their property, but Andersons, they didn't. But whoever wanted to buy Jones's property was told, well, you have to buy the whole thing. That does not seem fair to me, but that's what happened. And things fell through with the developer that wanted just my dad's property. He didn't want Chief Auto Parts property. He wanted just my dad's property, but it never got past the planning commission. So my dad's 92, going to be 93 years old. He needs this to get done. And in order for we to get bids or proposals on Chief Auto Parts on these 4 lots, they need the CSM passed. And this has been going on for a long time. And I think we need, Chief Auto Parts has been a good taxpayer. Chief Auto Parts has been there since 1947. My mom and dad built that business, a successful business. They always paid their taxes. They always followed the rules and regulations of everything, DNR, Department of Finance, whatever there was, within the city, within the state, within the county. So I'm just basically pleading that this gets passed. It has to get done. Okay, thank you.
I do have one more thing. I went on the internet and looked at intersections throughout Winona and found this parcel, which is the Winona State Bank. This is Panther Trail here, Winona Drive here. The distance from the back of the curb here to there is 14 feet. They have a 36-foot opening.
Could we correct that? That's Schwen Auto. That's not the bank. That's Schwen Auto.
Isn't the back of this side?
Yes, but the bank doesn't have that curb cut.
No, that's
Okay,
true.
thank you.
Yeah, but I was gonna get to the bank too.
Okay.
And the bank, their entrance is way down here. So what I'm saying is this is almost identical situation and it seems to work. And I think Winona Drive is probably has more traffic than Broadway.
But it has a lower speed.
Pardon?
Has a lower speed.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Thank you. We'll close the public hearing portion of this and move to item number B, which is consideration of action on the request by Carl. Say it again. Last name? Sandsness, thank you. PLS and property owner Jim Whitehorse for approval of a revised 4-lot CSM at 1208 East Broadway, Lot 2 of CSM 8819, case number 2-012-2018. I'm going to start by suggesting, my guess is that you're going to have some questions, so you might as well get back up to the to the microphone. And we're going to start with Corey.
So you have my staff report. Basically, it's just the CSM was approved conditionally back in September by the Planning Commission. 6 conditions. They took care of most of them as far as submitting a revised CSM. The only difference was that the CSM, which was also in your packet, the revised CSM, showed the 20-foot no access on the 50-foot drive from the north end, where the Planning Commission had approved 30 feet. Discussion with a couple of Planning Commission members felt that this was enough of a change that we should bring this back to the Planning Commission for approval. So Carl presented the drawing that he had out there before, and that's probably the point of contention this whole discussion tonight.
Thank you. So I'll open it up for committee feedback.
Okay, first, since there might be somebody actually watching this on TV, I just want to address your 2 comments.
Okay.
Number 1, on the piece you showed that was by Winona Bank, that was an existing street.
Yep.
And Schwen's been there a long, long time. They haven't redeveloped. So until they come in for a conditional use permit or try to redevelop, there's not a lot we can do about that driveway cut.
Yeah.
We're aware of it, but if they came in for a CSM, for example, or a conditional use, it would be addressed at that time. There used to be a service station, if you remember, on the other corner where the bank is.
Right.
And when the bank bought that and redeveloped, they were told no access that close to the highway, and that's why it got pushed way back. So this is actually much easier situation than what the bank went through. So
Right.
just for the record, in case somebody's listening about that. As far as your property, I'd like to say one thing. I know that proposal is here. I was here 5 years ago when it came in. But again, in case somebody's listening, this CSM hasn't been before us for 5 years. This CSM has only been before us for a few months. What happened was there's another proposal before. And the difference with that proposal was we had the developer come in and wanted to change the master plan and the zoning for that area, and they wanted to put in some residential. And we came to that developer and said, if you want to do this, we'll try to work with you, but you have to look at a new area plan for that whole area. You can't take a small area, put in residential, and surround it by commercial, almost industrial. So we wanted to see a master plan for the whole area that made sense to be able to put residential in there. And to do that, he needed more land. and that's why he came back to us, and that's why he was messing around with the different properties. So, I just want to say, it wasn't just a simple thing that I want to put something on this one piece of property that meets the master plan, because it didn't. And that's why there was a lot of issues on that one. So, going back to what you're proposing tonight, I think this is a great idea. I think you've come up with a lot of stuff that can work. I have a few edits or tweaks to it, where I think it would work, and I think it would get your purpose, and I think it would protect that road, which is what we like. So if we could put, not the overhead projector, but the document reader on again, I'd appreciate it. You know, I'm old. Once I get that in my head, I can't get it out. So what I did, I looked at this, I marked it up a little bit. Your original island, it's hard to see, it was way out to here.
Yeah.
Which is beyond the back of these cars a little bit. So my thought, let's pull it out to the back of these angled stalls. Because that's about 5 feet, give or take. That allows us to get another 5 feet, give or take here, which between the 5 feet here, this 5 feet and the 8, that gives us about 18 feet, which is about what we need to protect the car sitting there before it goes over the sidewalk. It would give you the same 24 feet, and it would give us that car that can sit behind that sidewalk before it pulls out there. My other suggestions or edits are, we can't have an island going through the sidewalk.
I know.
So that's out. And then that would allow us to pull this back, and then to address your tanker, I agree with the tanker, and I also agree with the semi trying to get in here. I would suggest at least the front and the back, or maybe this entire island be made mountable.
Exactly.
Where a car won't want to go over it, but a semi has no problem. So I would suggest we do that, pull this back, and then my last suggestion is, I like this, the 11-foot lanes. This is perfect for getting out of the site. 11 foot for getting in is too tight. Again, your semi can't get in, our cars can get in there, but a larger truck, and we don't know what's going to be back, oh, I'm off the thing, we don't know, my hand, we don't know what's going to be back here.
Right.
So not knowing that, we have to make sure we can get things there too, and this whole thing illustrates why a 50-foot wide right-of-way for a road is really tough to build in. But I scaled it, and it scales 47. It doesn't scale exactly right. I'm thinking somewhere in here, by adjusting things a little bit, perhaps a few scaling errors, we could get about 14 feet. And that would be a lot better for an entrance.
Right.
So my
Like
suggestion.
I said, you know, this was just a.
Understood,
sketch.
but we gotta try to approve something that we think is actually going to work,
Yeah.
not only for the service station, but any other uses. There will almost certainly be large trucks coming back if you're going to put some density and some I'm pointing back again. Back here, then we have to make sure we can service it. So again, I would suggest that we widen this, pull this back, we pull this back, and now with this curve here, you've pretty much eliminated this, but you could actually, which works better, you can't see it, but you could put a couple right angle stalls right here, so you've captured these two here. So now this car backs up into your own property, but now when these back up, they're also here, they're not trying to back up into that road, so you can actually salvage a couple parking stalls here. I guess you can see it on there.
But that's not up to us to decide that, that's the gas station.
That's absolutely a gas station.
Yes.
It's a suggestion on my part on how they can do it.
Right, I understand.
Once this curb is here, they won't have use of these. And so I'm trying to do is figure out something that works for everybody. So those are my suggestions. And actually, it is a little bit of plan commission, because if the service station is part of this, whether they like to be or not, because you're asking to redo this with a 50-foot road. Your point of they have an easement here, they have an easement between properties, but if there's a requirement or a condition from the city, that has to be met. So if this curb is through here, then the curb has to be through there. They have an access agreement with you, but I would argue, once you put this in as a private access drive, they have access rights along the whole thing. It's just depending on where they can get them.
Yeah, the only reason I'm bringing this up, even though they have ingress egress, is we have to make them whole too. I mean, we
Absolutely.
just can't
Absolutely.
cut them off.
Absolutely.
Is what I was trying to say.
So with your proposal, with a few little tweaks, I actually think it will work. I think it's better than what we were talking about, but we didn't have a lot of data to work with last meeting. So
Exactly.
that's one.
That's a curve right through here. Is there-
There's a curb right through here,
Yeah.
all the way down around.
Yeah.
This here. That's the curve. What is that line
Well,
there?
that's the right way.
That's the right of way. Why would there be a curve there then?
Oh, yeah, that's where the lane.
Yeah, that's this curb.
That
Yeah.
is a curve.
Yeah, that's the lane
Yep.
coming out to
Okay.
make
Yep,
it two.
it's upside down from this one, but that's the
Right.
same curb.
Yeah.
What she's referring to is this curb here.
Yeah, yeah.
Which that plan she has in her hand shows a gutter, valley gutter through here. Would or wouldn't have to be, that'll depend on the final design and the drainage, if they have to convey water through there or not. I don't know where the water is going to be going. I think right now it comes out this way, doesn't it?
It comes that way, and I think it's gonna flow actually south out of there. It may go to the west too.
So,
I don't know.
that's what I thought, or saw when I saw it.
Okay, all right. Kathy?
Well, who could disagree with Chris?
Oh, come on now.
No, I think it's a good solution. I think it's an easement. They have to be able to get through it, but you have control, it's still your property. And we have a responsibility to make sure that it is a safe ingress and egress place, and anybody who's buying the land to develop on it will want the same thing and will probably be grateful for it, because then they don't have to go through stuff with the people next door. So I think it's a good idea. I think it will work well. You just have to explain it to staff so they can write it all down, Chris.
Yeah, I don't see, I see a version of that being a reasonable solution to this. Yeah, my first comment was that that island has to be mountable or something, just so a truck can just go over top of it. I don't know if the gas station is going to reclaim any parking stalls. Having angled parking backing into 90-degree parking, that could be a parking conflict. But I guess that's, they can look at that. Maybe they can salvage one spot. Yeah, other than that, I don't have anything else.
Brian?
I think this is a workable solution overall. One question I have, and I'm trying to remember back when we talked about the access out of this current drive, and remembering back a few years back, I thought we had a discussion about exit and would it be right in, right out, although there is the median cut in the middle of Broadway. I can't remember where that question came from before. Well, I know the median cut is there currently,
Right.
and I don't remember the conversation about the stacking of cars for the left turn and the concern. The right turn, I think, is easy to stack the single car to be able to take that right, because they're not going to be waiting a long time. That whatever goes in behind here, if there's a lot of traffic flow trying to exit and they're trying to turn left, there's going to be a potential concern
Well,
for development.
we brought up,
They can't hear you. Huh?
we brought up a few years back about getting access to the east side of the gas station. There is a road there, but we aren't given any approval on that. We tried to go to the DOT, they shut us down, you're familiar with that. And the village, I always want to call it Monona Village, City of Monona, I believe, would have to request that through DOT, and that would be an out to the right.
That would be a frontage road.
That would be a
along
frontage
Broadway.
road, and that road has always been there, and it is a designated
Yeah.
road.
That's when Monona was requesting that there'd be a frontage road going down to the set of lights to exit out.
That was for the overall development for the assembled land.
Exactly.
And on that overall development for assembled land, there was this intersection with the left out, but then we had another reliever that was a right only, because it
Right.
didn't have the median cut. So there were actually a couple egress points, and we had the one that wasn't lined up with this. It was further,
East.
I believe, was it or was it west?
It's east.
It was east, okay.
Yeah.
It's east.
And that's there for the gas station right now. They have it right out
Mhm.
on the other end of their canopy.
And that land adjacent there is the DOT land, if I remember right.
That's correct.
And then there's
Yeah.
wetland.
Because that's a road there
Yeah.
too.
And that was one of the
Stormwater
main
storage area.
entry points for the proposal. I think you were chair at the time, weren't you?
That's what I was trying to remember back, because
Yep.
I think we had a conversation about if this eventually became a controlled intersection, is it too close to the other controlled intersection? And
And that really depends on what uses go into this private road. It's
So
completely.
something to consider of when you're talking with others of if it's a high volume and
Oh, yeah.
it needs to be a controlled intersection of
Oh, yeah.
what that will entail.
And that whole interchange at 51 and the Beltline, that was a factor as well, because that's all under design or in design,
And we still
being
don't,
reconstructed.
we still don't know 5 years later, do we?
Yeah, the
There's
Super 8 or
three
whatever. it
designs
is.
for that area right there, because they don't know what kind of ramp they want. So that's still up in the air.
I mean, with all that said, I think this is a doable proposal for now, and I would just encourage you, as you're working with developers, to think through that, so you don't build something and then you have to change it. It's always more expensive doing that. so.
Great. Susan?
Yeah, I don't have anything to add. I think these are good solutions. I think the comments Chris made make sense.
Okay. Griff?
I agree. I think it's a good solution.
Okay. Great. So would you like to put, would you like to make a motion
Yep.
with those changes?
Move approval with conditions 2, 3, 4, and 5 that staff had written. So his condition 1 is what we agree on tonight, which I would suggest we agree on the sketch as submitted by the applicant with the modification to extend the curb, the north curb island that we just showed 5 foot further south, and then also that's the south island. So I'm talking about this 5 foot here and pulling this one back 5 foot, and that we don't show that past the sidewalk. That can go down 5 foot. This would be mountable, and then we'd have a 14-foot entry aisle is what we're looking at tonight based on what we know.
Got it.
Did we catch all that, Sierra?
Got YouTube to review it.
Okay, and the reason I say that is for what we know.
Right.
Again, as Alder, or not Alder anymore, Mr. Holmquist said, if you end up selling this to a hotel, for example, or a fast food, there'd be some traffic there, and at that point in time, we would look at this again
Exactly.
to see what's going on. And then the other condition I would suggest is that this work does not need to be done until the first lot is developed. There's no point in making anybody spend money right now, but that condition would be once the first lot, any of those 4 get developed, then you need to do this work.
Yeah.
Until then, for the gas station, it's
I'm
business
sure
as
that's what
usual.
we had planned anyhow,
Yeah.
so.
Okay, but it needs to be in the condition, so you know for the CSM that you don't have to do it to get your CSM approved.
Yep.
But it is a condition that has to happen for the future development.
I
Kathy?
want a clarification on
Okay.
that. It's not once it's developed,
As it's developed.
as
it's
when the
being built.
development plans are submitted,
That,
which is what I knew what you meant. but-
yeah, I'd say it'd have to be concurrent with the development of the first lot, and you wouldn't get occupancy in the first lot that's developed until this was also done.
Yep.
So that's probably a lot clearer, you're right.
Yeah.
So that way you'd be able to use,
Can I ask something? If the back lot, I don't know what.
I
number
think we
it
have
is.
to get a second before we can
Yeah, I was
actually
just gonna
legally.
say we need a
Thank you.
second.
Now-
Do I
now
have a
we can
second?
Now we can discuss
I'll
it.
second it.
Okay, Kathy's seconded.
It's
Okay, now we
Robert's
can
rules.
discuss it. Yeah.
Okay.
Lot 2.
Lot 2 is in the back
That's
towards
the
the
back
water.
one,
What if a developer wants that lot first?
Any of the lots, at any point when those lots are developed, you're putting more traffic on this private road, that's when this improvement for that intersection
Okay,
has to be
But
done.
like the curb, does that have to be put in at the time?
Yes.
Because with all of the construction, isn't that gonna get all wrecked by the vehicles and trucks and everything? I understand you gotta have a roadway in there that
Mhm.
goes back there, and that I understand. I guess I'm just not understanding putting in the final curb when it can get all run over by these trucks anyway.
Well,
You know what I
No,
mean?
that's,
We-
that is part
Is
of
that-
construction, that's normal.
Is it,
It-
okay,
You know, there's different ways you can do it. The payment going in, you could have one coat and put the second coat on later.
okay.
So, actually it helps because it compacts it.
any differential's gone, but yes, what it does is you have to get the traffic organized here before you put
Okay.
more traffic down there. So at that point in time, were I you and it was a back lot, I'd go to Plan Commission, I'd say, well, we're going to do that, but perhaps this curb here doesn't go in right now or something like
Yeah.
that, but you'd have to ask for that. Right now, the condition is that this would have to be built as soon as a lot is developed.
Because there is another driveway on the way in, so, but that's just in coming from the west going to east.
That may not be for these lots. That has to go through the gas station, so they'd have to have.
No, the other one.
Oh, you mean way down here, this way?
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Harry and
That's
Debbie's.
been addressed too.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
that can remain.
That's another entrance.
Right.
Well,
Only
This
from the
one.
west,
The-
only from the west.
That's at the.
when you say it's been
driveway,
addressed, when you come for a development proposal on conditional
Well,
use, it'll be addressed
Yeah,
at that
that's
point
it,
where it
yeah.
can
I
remain
mean,
there.
as far as the CSM, it's been.
The CSM, yes, hasn't
Okay.
done anything with it, but when you come in with a development proposal,
another
that's
issue.
when it gets really addressed. Okay. Is that clear as mud?
Yeah.
So it's approved.
So, any other discussion before we vote on the motion on the floor? Okay. All those in favor of the motion, can you, do we want
Sure,
it read back to us, or do you want to?
sure. We're approving it with the sketch we got, with the
Yep.
modifications
Modifications,
that
14 feet?
this curb be pulled out 5 feet, this curb be pulled back 5 feet. This island doesn't extend past the sidewalk, and that's pulled out 5 feet. This median break is mountable, and the ingress is widened to 14
14
feet.
feet. Yep.
Now, we still need pedestrian access to the back, so I'm glad you showed that. I'd like to not take it all as terrace, that's why I asked you to check your dimensioning.
Right.
This is a rough sketch, and
Yeah.
with a 50-foot easement, you can get a lot of this just by tightening it up, and maybe a little bit out of a terrace or
Yeah.
something.
And again, we had to stretch the photo to match
Un-
our field measure.
Understood. And then the last point of it was that at the point of development of the first lot in the CSM is when work has to be done, and this work has to be done by the time they get occupancy for the first lot that's developed.
Right, exactly. Okay. So, all those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Yeah,
They can start, we can tell the realtors that.
This is for Public Works, doesn't it?
Doesn't it have to go to
Council.
Has to go to council, doesn't it?
Subsequent to Plan and Public Works.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but it has to, doesn't it have to go
Public
through
Works
Public
and-
Works first?
Public Works and
Public
Council.
Works and Council.
Yeah, Public Works and Council first, yeah. 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 Yeah.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you. I hope it works out. I hope it works out,
Yeah, well.
especially for your elderly dad.
Used to be my playground. Playing in all those cars.
Okay, we have no new business. So we're going to move right to reports of staff and commission members. We have a staff report. I believe we have, number one, we have updates and discussion regarding sign code revisions from Vanderwall. We're here tonight. Would you like to step up to the podium?
Hello, everyone. We're back. My name is Ben Rohr. This is Mike Slavny. We were here just a couple months ago and have been working on the sign code, as you know, for several months now. So we have come to you with a revised version based on some of what we heard in the last meeting from you guys in direct comment. And then also the city attorney was also able to kind of thoroughly vet every bit of this and find the areas that he needed to comment on and potentially change as well. So basically, what you have provided in your packet is a summary of basically the changes that the city attorney suggested and were made. At the bottom, there is some potential kind of points of conversation for us tonight to have. And then on the back is kind of a summary of the edits that you guys provided to us last time. And then obviously the revised code itself. So I wanted to kind of start off by saying that we are aiming for a public open house in January, about mid-January. We wanted to obviously get this out in front of the public and get their reaction to it prior to going back to you guys for recommendation and then to council for approval. In addition, we would like to, or we're reaching out through the chamber to have them invite all of their members to participate in that public open house as part of the process. So I just wanted to update you guys on kind of where we were in the timeline. Granted, hopefully everything goes smoothly, but that's the intended guideline right now, or timeline right now. So I wanted to kind of basically start with the attorney's edits, which is that first page there. In the majority of the top half of the document there were edits mainly around content neutrality, which is basically one of the major reasons why the city needed to update its code in the first place, is because of that Supreme Court ruling that we have discussed in the past that made content neutrality, or you couldn't enforce, or you couldn't regulate signs, I should say, by content any longer. So that was a lot of what the attorney's kind of impetus for edits were. And then he also had several just references to other codes that he wanted to update and some kind of clarification, stuff like that. Really what I think the majority of this conversation we're hoping to have today is about those bottom 4 bullet points under committee ideas that are not necessarily agreed upon. In those edits were suggestions from the city attorney that kind of were changes to things that specifically either we talked about as a plan commission or that we talked about in the individual working group up to this point. So we wanted to address them with you tonight before we went to the public with the release of this document. So the first point can be found on page 6. That's 48064D, and that is related to the temporary miscellaneous sign category, which is what you might typically know as the yard sign in a residential neighborhood that says for rent or slow down for kids. We've had quite a bit of discussion about this particular topic in the past, and especially around either allowing commercial signage within that category or not allowing it. We've had conversations in the past with you all, and you have voiced the opinion that you did not want to allow commercial signage in that category. The city attorney disagreed because he thought that classifying a sign as commercial or not commercial would be deeming it content or basing it off of content. So we wanted to bring that to your attention. We wanted to have a discussion whether you either agreed with his suggested change or wanted to potentially find a compromise or a middle ground with his suggested edit on that particular issue. Yes?
So help me reason through this.
Why aren't they considered off-premise?
I don't
In front of a residential property,
commercial.
I put a sign for a business that I own that is not located there. It's operated miles away.
Off-premise.
That's an off-premise sign. How does that fit with a commercial content in a residential area if it's not based on content of the sign?
Right, so different communities have taken the approach that you can prohibit off-premise signs And under a more conservative interpretation of that Reed v. Gilbert case in 2015, other communities have just backed off content and said that these yard signs can contain anything they want, and including advertisements for commercial products or services.
So could I rent out my yard and have people put signs in them?
So you could potentially rent out your yard sign.
No, I want to rent it out to McDonald's or Burger King.
You could rent your permitted yard sign theoretically out to a commercial use. Or you could advertise the six-pack special at the convenience store or other commercial services as well as products. So in California, there was a case that went to the Court of Appeals in federal court. This is freedom of speech issues. And in that federal district, the court upheld the ability to prohibit off-premise signs, and in that way essentially prohibit commercial messages. That's a different federal district than our district. I think now I've written 7 of these codes, and 3 communities have allowed any message, and 4 communities have prohibited commercial or off-premise messages. So we find a different reaction in each community that we present this particular issue to. Bill has told us that he's going to recommend that there is no prohibition and that those signs can contain any content.
Yes, Kathy.
Personally, as much as I like Bill, I hear more complaining about advertising signs on people's yards. There's a great deal of respect for the neatness and how well people keep up their yards and their flowers, and they don't like all those signs. And, you know, I'm not on the council,
Right.
but if the council talked to the community, I think they would get the same message that I get from people, which is they don't like them, they don't feel it's necessary. And I suppose if someone wants to sue us, you can change it. But in the meantime, I personally hope that we will not allow people to clutter up their yards with every kind of advertising there is. That it's just, it goes beyond free speech.
So, just as a question related to this, because I'm not recalling in terms of the rest of the detail, would this also, this provision would that also apply to not just renting, to Kathy's example, to Burger King, but would that also apply to, advertising for a library event, or advertising for, not elections, because that's a different category, but if somebody wanted to put a sign up related to a library event, or related to a swim meet, or related to, they could also do that.
The other communities where I've written this code have prohibited off-premise signs. They've stayed away from commercial messages versus not-for-profit messages.
Okay.
To me, as a planner, probably seeing things differently than an attorney would,
Yeah.
or a normal person, I think that's a relatively bright line. And the case law in California was distinguished between on-premise and off-premise, not about commercial or nonprofit.
Nonprofit, okay.
So I don't understand what you just said. So we could allow a pool or a swim meet advertisement while not allowing commercial messages, or no?
No.
Okay.
Excuse me, if it's a city event and it's the right-of-way, that city property, is it not? And could you not put a city sign in that?
Well, that's a creative way of looking at it. I think that might fly. We do have other opportunities in the sign code for notifying the public of community events.
But if it's a city event and it's right-of-way, you could put a city sign in there. There are lots of doors into this house.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's part of the reason why I asked the question, because Kathy, I agree with you that probably the community, if you started renting your property to Burger King, they, no offense to Burger King, but, you know, true commercial establishment, off-premise, they would probably have difficulty with it, but we all know that there are a lot of community members that like to advertise city events.
And I have lots
In
of
the
right-of-way
events.
in front of my property.
Right, and in the other communities, it was not only advertising off-premise, but advertising a competing facility in another municipality. Really off-premise. So I think that as Kathy mentioned, the other communities that approved the restriction said if we face a lawsuit, then we can consider the issue at that moment and what to do.
Any other comments on this particular, yeah, Chris?
Yes. When we talked about this, now, number one, I agree with Kathy, we've been just stalwart about off-premise signage for businesses. But I thought we talked about, when we discussed this, like, since he's not here tonight, I'm gonna pick on him, Chad's Carpentry, when he's working on that site,
That's right.
that he could have a sign up because he's actually actively there working at it. What's the distinction?
That's a service that's being performed on premises.
So that would still be allowable then? We could write this so that off-premise signage isn't allowed, but this is an off-premise since he's actually on-site working.
Yes.
Okay, I think it's important to include that. A lot of people like to do, a lot of small businesses do that. Well, that's a different sign, that's in there. But people that do, you know, small home repair and stuff, that's their way of getting their name out.
That's right.
And I don't
Taxes,
think we're trying to stop that, pardon?
taxes, CPAs will do
Sure.
that.
Sure.
Well, landscapers.
Well, for their landscaping, yeah. I think what we're trying to, what we haven't allowed historically is for a business to start advertising in a residential district. Unless they're actively on site, they're working.
But Rob, I think you just brought up a really good point, which is to say that if it was a CPA or, for that matter, I mean, I work out of my house. My next door neighbor has a cleaning service out of his house. If I decided I wanted to put a sign up in my yard that said, you know, Conservation Consulting Group,
You can do it.
I don't foresee that being a big issue, even though I did bring up the point. And personally, I'm not a fan of this type of sign in general. I don't think oftentimes that any of these signs offer a lot, personally. And they clutter a community, in my opinion. Just like the sandwich board signs, I'm against those as well. Less is more. I'm a fan of signage, done tastefully and appropriately, but I think just because somebody dropped off a sign, throwing it in their front yard isn't always the most attractive thing for a community. But
I do think that we could, I mean, in my view, people working out of their house obviously is becoming a bigger and bigger and bigger thing. A lot of people are working out of their homes now. So I think it might open up a box that is problematic. But
The only way to close that would be to not allow these signs, period.
right.
They can do those now, can't they? They
No.
can do them now.
No, I don't.
He's saying yes.
The yard signs, I believe, are allowed now.
But the home business advertising, I don't believe in our code you can do right now.
That is correct.
Right. Right. Okay. Anything else as it relates to this first
Yeah, do we have clarity?
discussion? Well, we have clarity from this end of the table, so I was going over to this end of the table.
I would agree that the distinction between off-premises sign is a good one. We should incorporate that.
As a prohibited sign.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you want to leave it the way we suggested it rather than the way Attorney Cole is?
Tom, we're trying to drum up more business for him.
Susan?
I'm generally in favor of it too. I guess I wonder about, we mentioned these before, the please slow down signs that have realtors' names on them. I mean, where do they fall in this? Because there are a lot of them, to your point, Rob, but I kind of agree that it looks cluttered to me and I'm not a big fan. But more importantly, it is advertising for a business that's not necessarily an in-home business. So where, if we talk about off-premise advertising signs, does that include signs like that?
You could put the sign up, but not the name of the company, right?
Well,
Well, they all currently have the names of the companies, so yeah. I'm just wondering where that.
it's a little circumstantial, but in that very example you brought up about a real estate agent putting their name, company on a sign that says slow down, it wasn't long after that there was a competing company.
Right.
And now we have twice as many signs.
Right.
I would say the way we're wording it right now, you wouldn't be able to put that real estate name on there because we're allowing no off-premises advertising.
Unless that property was for sale by that company.
Yeah.
Right.
Or in consultation with that company.
Currently.
Yeah, so I think it brings up I'm trying to broaden it, the idea of if a sign is sponsored by someone. And so I say that a little bit more broadly in the sense of there's still a sign that you want up that says some type of message, and it was printed by a certain company and they want their logo on there, and that's how they donated the printing. That's how, for example, the signs that we hand out at our police department, those are our American Family, I believe. So it's not pure advertisement, although it's putting their emblem on there because they donated the printing for that to be done. I don't know, I think that one's a little tricky.
I can tell you that this is the only community that I've seen where those kind of signs actually are sponsored. In every other place that I've worked, and I look at yard signs, it's a terrible affliction. They are not. There may be a sponsor, but it is not, the sponsor is not named, or there's no logo on the sign. So there seems to be some other mechanism of getting those messages across without the need for a sponsor that's named.
Well, to your point, it's entirely likely that that is the case with real estate signs too. The real estate agent decided that they were going to print out and hand it out to those people that wanted to slow down in their yard, and since they underwrote the cost of those signs, it's the same sort of sponsorship, right?
Could be. And I would say those would
Difference being
be.
a commercial entity versus a nonprofit entity.
I used to get matchbooks with that kind of advertising on it.
Kathy.
Just so the council has guidance, I will make a motion to not allow off-premise signs. Yard signs, is that, how do we want to word this?
I think that would do the trick for us.
Okay, I will so move.
Second that.
Okay. And a motion and a second. Any other discussion before we vote on it?
For clarity's sake, that
Yeah.
means no off-site premise, meaning no commercial sign, off of the property in
That-
which the business is
That does not include if they're doing business there or if they have a business there.
Thinking specifically about the first one that we're in discussion about, right?
We'll
Not
provide
adding
that
commercial.
clarification.
Right. Any other discussion about it? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Is this an action item?
Hmm?
I mean,
It wasn't noticed for action.
You don't need action, but it's helpful for them when they go to put them down that we have a consensus on what
Okay.
needs to
Do we
change and
need
what
to
doesn't.
post it though for action?
yeah,
What does it say on the agenda?
it says
We
update
don't
discussion.
have to- We don't have to, I just, since you made a motion, I thought that,
We'll call that a
it's a
recommendation.
recommendation to the council, how's that? Rather than a motion, because we don't need motions tonight. under this.
We all agree that you're providing us clear direction on this ramp.
Could you speak into the microphone?
I think we all agree that your actions tonight are not a final approval, but providing us clear
Correct.
direction on a draft.
Correct. Great. Shall we move to 48070, number 3?
May I make one comment? I agree with Rob. I think these signs clutter our community, but I think there'd be an outcry if we didn't allow some of them. I would love to see none of them, but I just don't think that's reality. I think people like to have their voice and put a sign up.
I agree, unfortunately, but, yeah.
So,
Okay, thank you. So the next one? you guys wanna explain?
Actually, I put these in the wrong order. That was my
Okay.
mistake. But the third one down,
All right.
footnote number 5,
Mhm.
48074. That one has to do with the same category that we were just talking about, so we should probably just address it right now. Basically, how we delineated what a sign for an election was based on permitted within a period of 30 days prior to and 7 days following any local, state, or federal election hosted by the city. In the city's attorney's review, he did not think that we should include that language because he recalled some case that he hasn't provided us with that information yet, but he said he recalled a case where that was not legal to define based on that basically definition for political signs. Kind of creates another issue like we've just been talking about. What is these signs that we want to have allowed in the, basically in people's yards as those yard signs. So if we were to keep this language, then we would have the ability to regulate the political sign time of year, which is every year basically, multiple times a year sometimes. And that allowed for extra signs in your yard as it's written right now. But changing that, taking that out, could potentially open the door for 3 signs in a yard all year if we scratched that language completely or just kept it at 1 sign per year.
Well, the fact that he recalls something, but he doesn't know the case, he hasn't had the time to look it up.
To be fair, I haven't followed up on that exact request from him at this point, but he did mention it at some point during our conference call with him about a case that he potentially knew about this being an issue.
Well, I'm not willing to give it up I think maybe.
what's your experience in your other 7 communities?
Yeah.
Everyone else has adopted time periods.
And they all had attorney reviews?
Yes.
Maybe.
Rob, do you have anything to say about that one?
I would tend to agree with the other 7 communities.
Yeah. Okay.
Agree unless there's other proof
Okay.
or other information.
Okay.
I would agree with that.
Okay. So we want to keep the time periods?
What is the time we have now, 30 days?
It's supposed to be
30 days in
prior
advance and
then
7 days
7 days
afterwards?
after.
Yes.
Isn't that a little bit short? Or not?
I mean, for the after? Griff, are you referring to the 7 days as being short or the 30 days being short?
Well, either one.
So it gives you a week to pick up your signs, and it gives you a month before the election to have signs out. You think there should be longer? What's typical? What have you done everywhere else?
In a couple of communities, it's been 30 days, and a couple it's been 60 days, and a couple it's been from the filing deadline until the election.
I like 30 personally, or less.
I think 30 is fine. I mean, I don't want to get in January.
Yeah, I think most people, if somebody doesn't come and grab their sign, people will take it out of there unless they really like the,
There were a few hanging around longer than this class, actually.
So it seemed to me the 7 days is probably adequate. As far as the 30, maybe the council will have a better sense since they put out a lot more signs than we do.
Indeed. Okay, but we want to stick with it the way it is. The way I have it written. Okay.
Sorry?
But we're determining for tonight is that we want to stick with it where it is. rather-
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay,
That's fine.
should we move on to the next one?
Or the pre-
Yeah, we can go back to number 2 on that list.
Okay.
Footnote 13 on table number 3, that is related to flag signs. We've had quite an extensive discussion on this topic as well through the working committee and through our last meeting here on kind of defining what flag signs are. Basically, to allow a business to have their own sign or their own logo on a flag, but also allowing the normal federal government flags, and then also we debated last time on sports teams and logos. This stems straight up from a content neutrality standpoint of where we defined basically what a flag sign was based on the content of the flag. Because of the fact that we had talked about it so much, I did not want to take it out without having that conversation with you guys on what you felt was the necessary approach or in this capacity. As it's written now, it is very clearly based on content, what we would be defining a flag sign as. But we could think about how we wanted to reword it again, or we could keep it as it is, which if you look at what he basically did to the definition, he just said a maximum of 3 flag signs per lot. So that opens kind of the flag sign to be anything at this point. So we did debate on how many flag signs in the past. We landed on 3. We could go back to 1, or we could keep it at 3. There's kind of a lot of options here, and looking for some consensus as far as a recommendation goes from you guys.
what have the other cities done?
Right, in the draft code right now, a flag can be 48 square feet in area. So 1 is the typical approach. And that creates enforcement questions on Saturday Badger
Yeah.
games and when the Packers play, but otherwise, it hasn't been much of an issue to limit it to 1.
What do they do when they want to fly a state flag and the U.S. flag?
They get to pick.
Is there a
So
location
can you
issue? Can they
is
put
that
them up
fine?
on the curb at Monona Drive?
We haven't distinguished in the other communities, so it's just one of your choosing.
Is there a location issue, and can they put it any place on their, could they put it up at the curb?
Well, that's right away.
Well, up
We're looking,
Yeah, we had talked about,
This says on a flagpole.
yeah,
That's not much of a direction.
The pole can either be driven into the ground or attached to the building. If the pole is driven into the ground, it must be rigid and permanent. If the pole is attached, that doesn't explain, sorry.
But they can put the flagpole any place on their property?
That's how it's written.
Yeah.
And do we like that idea? On Monona Drive?
Well, it must be located on site and must not be located within any street right of way. That includes all of this whole category of signs, so, specifically putting the pole in the right of way would not be allowed.
No, but they could put it,
1 foot.
Well,
Yeah.
no. It could be 15, what is it?
Outside of the vision triangle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then if it's, for instance, on Monona Drive, it has to be so far back off the back curb.
Why?
'Cause it's a sign, right?
Doesn't say that. You mean the 15-foot we
Is
have
it
for
just-
monument
Is it
signs?
just for monument signs that?
Yeah, it doesn't really say it for a flag sign right now.
We haven't addressed it yet.
It's an excellent question.
do we care?
That's another good question.
The question was, do you care? Is that what you're asking, second?
Well,
Where it's at.
you know, most of the time I don't care, but what popped through my head when I was thinking about this is, we used to have all kinds of signs out at the curb, pylon signs, and Chris and I are around long enough that we went
And Griff.
through and Griff, when we made the businesses all pull their signs back, and, because we didn't want the sign
We
up.
have to talk about those yet tonight. Pylon signs.
Because it didn't look attractive if you were going down the street. So if everybody on Monona Drive put one up, I don't know if I like it or not.
Flags,
Yeah,
right behind the sidewalk. Basically, you could put it a foot off the sidewalk.
yeah. So I don't know if I'd like that.
The
And
gut
I-
says no.
You know?
I would like us to consider adding the same distance as our landscape monument sign. More consideration. If you're looking for direction for a draft, it might be to add some placement, at least off.
And are you comfortable with 3?
The 3 is an interesting dilemma.
It is.
And we haven't, I don't know a whole lot about flag poles in the sense that I'm not sure if more than one flag can be on a pole. And so I'm seeing one nod, yes. And if that's the case, has any community said, okay, yeah, you can have one flagpole, but like if you want to fly the US flag and then the state flag.
Yeah, we can't regulate content.
Correct, but could we limit the number of flag poles, which is different than the number of flags?
It strikes me that the number of flagpoles should be related to the size of the parcel. I mean, it makes a lot of sense to have on the WPS site 3 flagpoles. I mean, that's so big. I mean, I wouldn't care if they had 9 of them and, 3 in 3 different places. But if somebody's got a 50-foot lot on, here I go on Monona Drive again, but a 50-foot commercial lot, I'm not sure that although maybe they would be small flagpoles. So I don't have a problem with 3, because,
I think we would run, I mean, to me, that sounds like we'd be getting into a terrible slippery slope where we would be trying to regulate something or expecting people to come in front of us to, almost like they do for redevelopment, around how many poles they could put up. I
Why
don't know
would
that we
someone-
want to go there.
why would someone want to spend the money to put up a lot of flagpoles if it didn't look good or wasn't appropriate?
Well, let's say
Advertising,
that
'cause we
they
can't
had a
regulate
company
content.
flag.
Yeah,
Sorry?
advertising.
If they had a company logo,
Right,
that's 3 extra signs.
Or message.
yeah.
Do a lot of messaging.
And I think that's why the other communities I've worked for said one flag.
Is there any provision in this for us to allow an exception to that?
I think you could allow an exception for an official flag of a local, state, or federal.
That's
government.
content. Bill just took that out.
I think you could do it for a government flag.
All right, my question was to say an applicant came in and we're looking at a conditional use. Under that conditional use, could we allow a second or a third pole for any reason, or if we put it in here, is that it?
I think typically a conditional use is used to add conditions, not to create flexibility. So unless that ability was built into the code, which it could be,
That's why I'm asking the code writer.
yeah, then you could.
That sounds like a reasonable
So reasonable to be, one is allowed, but
Right.
more can be allowed for larger parcels, or, by plan commission approval may be allowed for whatever condition we come up with, a WPS campus or some reason, without
Right.
looking at content, just saying because of the size of this user, it would be appropriate to have more poles.
You could. We already have created that ability for a couple of monument signs for the really big lots. We could use those numbers if you wanted to.
Kathy?
Well, I like to assume the best. So I assume if I tell somebody that, if I allow someone to put up 3 signs, that they won't use 3 for advertising. Now, I might run into some jerk who comes along and does that, in which case I'd have to let him leave it, but I could prohibit it from anybody else doing it. And I guess that's the sort of, I hate to take things away from people just in case there's that one jerk out there, because I assume most people will try and do things right. I mean, that's just sort of my thinking on it, that I like flags, and I like when I like what WPS has, and I like when they have the United States flag, and when they have a state flag, and if they have a Packer or a Wisconsin flag. I think that looks very nice. Do I think many people will abuse it and put up advertising? Pretty expensive to do that, and I don't think they would. But if they did, there's a time in the future where I can say, okay, fool me once, but I'll change it and you won't do it again.
Yeah, that existing bad actor would have legal non-conforming flags at that point, and you could, if you change the ordinance, this code is long, and you'll be tweaking it from time to time in the future.
So what did you say the other 7 communities did on this project?
One.
They did one.
All of them, all 7 of them only did one.
That's your advice.
That's easy to count, and remember, there are no exceptions, so it's easy to administer.
And is it number of poles or number of flags?
They all focused on the number of flags, but you could, I think, do it based on the number of poles.
Well, I mean, I was just thinking if we're focused on sports teams, or for that matter, government flags, you could have, there's lots of scenarios where people put more than one government flag on a single pole. They don't necessarily have to have multiple poles. They just have, state flag and.
I'd argue, what's the difference if they want to fly 3, if we allow 3 flags, whether they're on 1 pole or 3, it's still 3 flags.
Right.
I'd rather see them on 3 different poles if they're going to do that.
I kind of like Chris's idea of going with the popular 1 flag, and we could even say 1 pole with the ability to come to Plan Commission in those, what I think will be rare scenarios where a property owner is going to want to have 3.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing that your attorney will be okay if you have that language, because we're not basing it on content.
Okay. We okay with that down here?
Can I make a motion?
I think so. I think I was trying to think through another scenario where a business may have multiple flags mounted to the building, and there's small individual flags as part of corporate branding. So I think it's Checkers, if I remember right, has like the little raceway flags that are mounted on the side of their building, around their building, or Advanced Auto Parts.
Your banners.
Is another one, I'm not sure if Red Robin does that. They might be blade signs, but I think there's like multiple signs on the exterior of their building as part of their,
Are they considered banners or flags?
they would be flags, I think, the way it looks.
Flags have one supporting pole, banners have two.
Yep, so it would be a single supporting, and it's fabric that's,
Can we have it worded really loose so that we can look at individual situations and we may be able to grant another flag or two or three?
Yes. And even if we did it, I believe under your overall zoning code, somebody could come in for a planned development and ask for that kind of flexibility.
Because under a planned development, we can create what we want.
one last
One
question.
sign per lot,
Maybe.
one sign per
I shouldn't say
business.
last. What about events like Memorial Day, where many people want to fly multiple flags in their yard? Or, for example, up at our park outside of our city limits, but there's a demonstration about lives lost in war and using flags to represent that. How would something like that dovetail with this ordinance for such a thing?
How large are those flags?
They're usually those relatively small, and then there's multiples of them.
The Memorial Day parade, they're quite large.
Right.
Yeah.
But this is under permanent signs, right? So
Great
so
point.
those were the,
Are we
Yeah.
talking one flag per parcel?
Yeah.
Per business?
It's written as one per parcel.
So if you have 4 separately platted lots?
No, that'd be 4 parcels.
If you had a strip mall on one lot, they'd be allowed one flag.
So like when we did the White Horse property, and they're gonna have 4 lots,
Each lot could have a flag.
even if you bought 2 lots?
Sure. You can buy them all. You can buy all of them on a drive. You still got rights on every parcel.
I'm never clear on what a parcel is.
Property, separate piece of property.
So, Brian, to your point, I think that the Memorial Day thing that you're talking about too, I mean, at least I look at that as, first of all, it is temporary, as Susan said, and second, it's, I mean, I've always understood it to be an art installation for the purpose of the holiday. That's what, but,
I would, I know we've gone down the path of using art, trying to not mix art with signs. And we had the
Right.
mural discussion.
yes, yeah,
And so it would be interesting about like a installation
Yes.
of representing something, using something that is regulated through sign.
The other thing
Yeah.
you could do is exempt federal holidays
it's
from the
temporary.
limit.
I think temporary is the
fact that
easier
it's temporary,
solution.
we don't have to do that, I don't think.
Temporary is still only one sign per lot.
Well, the only thing, well, true, is that our
Kids.
flag signs under that
Flag
category?
signs aren't even
They're not-
described right
they're not
now
described
No.
for temporary, correct?
temporary.
Can the exception that you're writing into this ordinance, can it also apply to that? So couldn't somebody come in for a temporary permit to line Monona Drive with flags for Memorial Day, and you come to Planning Commission, I have approval, and Planning Commission could say, go for it?
If it's in your right of way, I think, it's not subject to this code. Zoning
Really?
doesn't apply within right of way.
There you go. That good old right away.
Okay. Another do as I say, not as I do situation.
So the code doesn't apply to any city property?
It applies to city properties, but your right-of-way is subject to your streets ordinance and not to the zoning code.
Interesting that we then had to have a zoning code rewrite for some of the directional signs and historic marker signs that are actually in our right-of-way.
Yeah, well, I'm
Yeah.
speaking in principle, maybe not in practice.
Okay.
There are some odd
Yeah.
provisions because you've got highly variable rights of way
Yeah.
in the city. But generally, permission to do things in the right-of-way, let's say it that way,
Would be public
can
works.
be granted by Public Works or the council above and beyond what the zoning code prohibits.
I wonder if we could add in the temporary miscellaneous sign group, an exception for flag signs during federal holidays.
You're
It
talking
potentially
US
could-
flags or all flags?
Maybe it's just that.
I think one consideration would be to not worry about the content of the flag, but to allow flags temporarily during federal holidays.
Okay.
That way, if we get into which flag, then I think we get back to the content issue, and Bill's going to have a concern about that. But if we leave it open of federal holidays, fly as many flags as you want in your yard and have fun, take them down by tomorrow.
So it sounds like we've come to consensus of also, but wanting to stick with one flag, with us being able to have an exception, which is what you.
To allow multiple flags on the same piece of
And now we're
property.
also adding to that, wanting to add an exception for federal holidays.
And the 15-foot.
And the
Setback.
and the 15-foot, right, like the monuments and setback, right. Okay, are we good on that one?
So we're back to just one flag. So what about people who want to have an American flag on one side of their garage and an Irish flag on the other side? And it's not on a pole, but it's on one of those side house mounted. I mean, I thought we had talked about that kind of thing before too,
We
because
did.
there are
This-
people who do that.
Does this apply to private residences or just businesses? It
The
does,
way
right?
it's written now, it would apply
Yeah.
throughout the city.
Yeah, it
Right.
would.
That's right. So I was wondering if we want to say, for the footnote, a maximum of one flag pole, which a pole is defined as something that is actually a pole in the ground and isn't it? I mean, would that apply to these flags that come out at an angle, that come, at a bracket?
It would right now.
Yeah.
It would?
Does-
That would be a pole too?
Well, we're just regulating by number of.
Yeah,
Right.
on
but-
page 14, it shows what a flag is. It shows either or under the last little,
The icon.
what do we call them? Diacon?
The icon?
Icon. Thank you.
Oh, right. Oh, gotcha.
Sign
Yes,
diagram.
it does show that.
I guess it
Okay.
says it there.
So that is a pole. Well, I mean, I don't want to make a homeowner come to the plan commission to
No.
have two
Yeah.
flags on their house. I mean, a Green Bay Packer flag and an American flag. And I think that does happen, or a UW flag. I mean, you see those occasionally.
Green Bay Packer and UW, I've seen multiple times.
Right. So if we say one flag, I think that's.
So do we go back to Kathy's point, allow it, and then if they start taking advantage, change it?
You could say two
We could-
rather
we could
than
say
one.
two
We
instead
keep
of
going
three.
from 1 to 3.
You could also do it differently because we have it recategorized into zoning districts. The single-family and two-family zoning district could have a different amount allowed than the commercial or multifamily conservancy, other zoning districts.
And if I'm in a business, I'm going to say, why can they have two and why can't I?
Because they vote and you don't.
I think, Susan, you make a good point. I think 3 is actually the magic number. So you have the 2 garage ones that tend to be sporting, and
Right.
sometimes, I know at least 2 houses in my head that I can think of, and then they have a third that's by their front door, that's the US flag.
Right. I think that's how we arrived at 3 in the first discussion.
We had this whole discussion in
And I
committee.
think it's, I guess I kind of
Yep.
agree with
It's
Kathy
deja vu.
in a sense. I think it's not likely that people are gonna put 3 for flag poles, big poles up on a small lot. And it's kind of like, it's not a problem yet, maybe we don't have to.
If we made all of the rules in the city thinking about the worst-case scenario,
Right.
we would probably be very unhappy. Now watch somebody will put a print sign up and you guys will pick it in front of my house. But
So it sounds like we're going back to a recommendation being the 3 flags and the 15-foot like the monument sign setback. Is that right?
Where's the setback
Well-
language?
It's not in
Oh, it's gonna be in there.
You might want us to raise our hands so you can find out how many.
Okay. Didn't think we were taking a formal vote, but all those in favor of that?
Well, I think they're just wanting clear guidance of
Right.
how many
Right.
agree to the concept of a setback.
We could hold up the number of fingers.
Okay. How many of you like the 15-foot setback? Okay. How many of you want to go with the 3 flags? Okay.
I may regret this, but what if we said 3 flags and not more than 48 square feet in total?
Oh, that's not a bad plan.
No. I mean, the flags you're talking about are, the minimums are, I suppose, 48. But you do 4x6 flag, that'd be 2 4x6s.
It's not very big.
Well, 4x6 is a big flag. I mean, a typical one's
Wow.
3x5,
Typical Badger flag or Packer flag is 3 by 5.
but there are a lot of 4x6s out there.
Okay, just,
I don't know.
just throwing it out.
If there's a
If you're
problem with 3, the
Mhm.
council will have to take it back to 1.
Well, think about this, so if we had it with a maximum square footage, but that can be extended by plan commission, then all these homeowners don't have to come to plan commission, because I don't see too many homes that have more than a 3x5 flag.
Right.
Now, some flag poles will have a 4x6 or even bigger ones, but if we go with 48, then you won't get a Perkins flag here in Monona.
Who's going to go around and measure these flags?
I
They'd be
think Cory-
complaint driven.
or Sierra.
John?
John, yeah.
And then how about the recommendation regarding the
Just what was
temporary
also- yeah,
flags
something.
on?
Oh, and that's, right, plus the temporary flags, we still have the temporary flag for the holidays.
Yeah.
right?
And was
Federal
that,
Just adding a
holidays, as opposed to
flag category.
football holidays.
Right.
but that is a national holiday.
Yeah, right. Okay, are we good there?
I think so.
What did we decide? The square footage.
Should I read it all back? All
No,
right.
no, I'm just curious on the last one, square footage, they threw that bomb in here.
Oh, I thought you said something about having more broad flexibility in language per towards 3 flags, but then could be increased by plan commission approval or.
The square footage, is that something?
You want square footage?
I think that's a desirable aspect of the 3x5, 2 of them and a 4x6. You're
Would work.
over the 48.
Yeah,
You haven't voted on that.
Right.
I'm
Right.
not sure that you like it.
Right, so are you suggesting a 3x5 or a 4x8? I'm confused.
Well, what I'm suggesting is if there are 2 more sports affiliated and they're going to be 15 square feet each, you're up
that'd
to
be
30.
and a 4x6, it'd be another 24, that'd be 54 square feet.
So we'd be fine if we went with the 60. 48 isn't going to make the magic number, that's all I'm pointing out.
Right, so you could round it up to 60 or something if you wanted to.
Not to
60 square.
exceed 60?
There's a reason that you brought that up. Why did you bring it up?
You didn't think we had
Because it
enough
seemed
discussion.
like you were comfortable with 3 small flags, but maybe you were worried about 3 outline size flags
Yeah.
on the same plot.
Who's going to put up this money for flagpoles that are?
A car dealer.
Yeah. Definitely.
Because you can fly whatever you want on it.
WPS's signs.
Right.
Sale.
Exception. We could still grant an exception for property like WPS. for the size, because of the scope and
Right.
size of the property, that'd be an easy one. As long as we have that ability.
So are we saying that we're just gonna, are we saying we want to put square footage in there?
Perkins.
You
Look
know,
at the sign at Perkins.
I don't think many homeowners are gonna have 60 feet, square feet
No,
worth
I don't
of
think they'll have a
flags.
4 by
I think,
6.
yeah, I think it's possible they'll have a bigger American flag and then 2 smaller ones, but even that's not gonna happen very often, so I don't know if I see a reason to put square footage in there. I'd probably leave it in the same,
Square footage would be for the commercial. I mean, I don't think the
Well,
homeowners will ever exceed it, but the commercial would
the
exceed it.
commercial would probably.
Yeah, and that, I think that's the reason he threw
Okay.
that bomb in there, just
I
when we
see.
were all settled, was, let's, we're accommodating the homeowners that want those flags, but, if some
Right.
business wants to be real garish and throw them out there, let them come here and ask for approval to be real garish and
So
throw
we'd
them out there.
have, so would that be a separate footnote that would, so we could specify that?
Not to exceed X amount?
Commercial.
Can't
without
exceed that
coming-
much without
without
approval.
coming- Right.
For commercial properties?
Well, you can't say it that
Or
way.
we can't- Or for all properties, okay.
Yeah.
We're just assuming people won't do it. Yeah, gotcha, okay. Yeah, So then what's the magic number?
Is what we landed on?
Have we landed on 60?
60?
I'm,
Yeah,
I'm okay with 60.
60 sounds okay.
That side of the table's crafting this one.
All those in favor of adding the 60? Raise your hand if you're good with the 60, adding the 60. Okay, great. Thank you.
Agreed.
On that part, yeah.
Okay, are we down to 94B3 and 96A1?
Yeah, so, this was a discussion we had specifically in the committee, the smaller group, I believe about non-conforming signs and whether they be subject to being brought down and into conformance if there was a change of ownership on the property. The city attorney did not like this because he argued something about there not being a law kind of around this subject in particular in other non-conforming situations that he knows about. And so with the actual land use change triggering the conformance of the sign, he was okay with, but not the change of ownership aspect of it.
He was okay with if somebody wanted to physically modify the shape of the sign, effectively put up a new structure, he was okay with it, kicking in that.
We've been doing it for 30 years.
Yeah.
And it's in our current ordinance. And it's been okay in our current ordinance. Our only problem is use may not change ever. And I don't think anybody in the community would argue that it hasn't been good to get rid of all the pylon signs up and down Monona Drive and Broadway, and we have very, very few left. But if we can't have a vehicle to, at least when there's a request for conditional use or something, and I think Paul Ament was the chair when we put in the condition that if it's a change of ownership or a conditional use, then that grandfathered use is out of there. And the theory for the attorney at the time, I think it was Lee Boucher, was that that owner has an economic value there, but with time that diminishes. And right now, any of those pylon signs are well over 30 years old. So there has to be some time when the community has a standard, I don't know what the legality would be, but sometime when the community has a standard that use has expired and that sign needs to become conforming. And those were our triggers before. And I think it's important for us as a community to have some trigger, if that's our community standard, to get rid of them and not allow them on those less traveled roads than the Beltline.
When we talk about ownership, if it goes, will we do the same thing if it's father to son? Because that's a change of ownership.
I don't know.
Because I don't want to do it if it's within the family. But if it's somebody who comes in and buys you out, then
It has to be legally defensible first.
Yeah.
We've done it for 25, 30 years, and I'm not aware of any situation where it's ever come back to the city.
But they weren't smart enough.
What do you all know about that?
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Well, we used to do it based on a change in message, which really,
Oh, that would be,
that was, Middleton did that on Old University Avenue, and they brought 95% of the signs into compliance in 15 years. But now we can't regulate based on content. So most communities say if you change the structure itself rather than the face of the sign. And this is the only place I've encountered that's used an ownership change as a trigger. I would agree, it's, in the absence of being able to use a change of message, it's effective. I think it's certainly okay to base it on if you get a conditional use permit or a planned development, because those are inherently give and take
okay,
situations, and you could impose that requirement.
that would be helpful.
Brian?
So I have an interesting side part that might reference of why the concern exists. So I think we have in place, which isn't a sign issue, but it relates. If you have an unpaved driveway, we have a trigger that if you do construction on the home of a substantial, you need to bring the driveway up to the standard of being paved. But it wasn't based ever on if you sell your home to the next occupant. They don't need to bring it up. They're buying it as is, whatever exists. And it was triggered by the change in the
Structure.
the home structure, and the relation of the driveway to the home structure was the defense when we talked about that issue. I'm not sure if that similar thinking is connected to this from Bill's standpoint.
Well, I think that's what you were thinking, that you were saying that other communities, it's based on whether or not the structure changes, not whether or not the ownership changes.
Well, we have that too.
Right.
I mean, we have that in our ordinance now.
But I think you could base it on, with a certain threshold, 20% of the property value or 10%. That would require careful tracking. It would relate to the value that was listed in the building permits, but I think that is a content neutral trigger. And I think that would probably pass muster.
Yeah, because that could be the way the sale between family members might be less of the concern compared to being bought out by a different company where the value would be substantially different, which could be the trigger point to have something like this concern.
I think you could also have either a percent or a flat number. I'm just, as an example, $100,000. That could trigger the need to bring the signage into conformance.
Okay. Other comments on this one? So where are we? Yes.
I guess my comment, I'd ask the attorney to work with you on finding some creative ways to limit the existence of pylon signs. The community's desire is to be rid of them on those two corridors, and we've done a really good job. There's a couple stragglers. But if it comes back to needing a conditional use, or they'd have to have a conditional use if it's going to be a major change in value generally. I mean, you can't say you've been reassessed and your property value went up, so now you take out your sign. I mean, that would be a double whammy. But whatever creative methods we could have that would be defensible. I mean, we've done the other one for years and it's worked.
I think particularly if you publish in the code that as part of a PUD or a conditional use permit, you can impose the requirement.
Great.
I think you can do that.
Okay.
We'll need Bill to
Okay.
look at it.
It would just be nice that we've done so well and there are so few left. I don't, it's a race to the top. Everybody wants to be higher than everyone else, but if we can keep them all at the same level, whatever that level is, then it's a fair playing field.
I just had a question whether the absence of a law to support that, if it's written in the code, I mean, is.
Right.
I don't see why that's.
There's a lot of stuff in our code that's not a
Right.
law.
Right, I mean, I would think absent a law that says we can't restrict it, that'd be a difference. But if you can't find a law, then I don't know why we would take it off.
As soon as my wife got her law degree, she started thinking differently than a normal person. I usually find she has a good reason to disagree with me, but we'll ask for more explanation.
Okay.
about this.
Okay, thank you. So the other edits that are here, obviously ones that, do we want to continue to go down the red edits? Or do?
I did want to specifically talk about the sandwich board topic.
Okay.
Because in the absence, we did have a pretty healthy debate, but I don't think we ever came to a true consensus
Okay.
on that subject. There was several back and forth between allowing them or not allowing them, size or a number of them. So I kind of just wanted to open up that topic as a discussion point to basically what we've just been doing, to get your feeling on what you would like to do with that subject in particular. So I believe that it is on page 13, temporary business sign group, halfway down the page there. Right now, we're allowing one for each business within 10 feet of the customer entrance at 8 square feet total area, 4 feet high and 2 feet wide.
How would this work? And the only thing that's coming to mind is some of the Jiffy Lube locations that put a sandwich board closer to the, it's clearly not within 10 feet of the entrance. I think that's one of the more prime uses I've seen.
We heard you several meetings ago being concerned about them placed out right at the edge of, front edge of the property. Other communities have used this within 10 feet or within 5 feet of an entrance to get them on the building apron, so that it truly is a pedestrian-oriented sign, not a particular traffic-oriented sign. But I would say that if they're allowed within 5 or 10 feet of the customer entrance, some of them will find their way to the driveway right at the right-of-way line on a regular basis, and then you've got an enforcement issue. So most of the communities that I work with allow these. They're trying to find a way to compliance because they're being deluged with these. And so the within 5 or 10 feet of the customer entrance, in their minds, in a nutshell, I think, is we need to find a way to allow these, but they need to be for pedestrians and not a distraction for drivers or an obstacle for people on the sidewalk. So that's how I think how they've ended up with that
Wouldn't it be 16 square feet if you've got two sides?
We count double-sided signs as the area of one.
Single side, yeah.
Okay,
Just like our monument signs, we do the same thing.
okay.
So what do you do if there's no building? And I'm thinking of like the Fall Festival, and he puts it in a park, and there's no building.
Yeah, I guess they wouldn't be allowed one.
What
If it's in the right of way.
No, you could put it in the right of way, but
That's the way this is written, it needs a building.
Well, in that same sense, like, I think there's a piece around enforcement as well. So the carnival comes to town. and you're putting out, how many tickets is this ride, how many tickets is this ride, and they do them on sandwich boards? I'm not sure that's the intent of what we're talking about here. Like,
When I was a carny, we just safety pinned them to the canvas.
Yeah.
How long was that?
That was when I was 17. That was a long time ago.
You're serious?
You just told me this story the other day. I couldn't believe
I
it.
started out at the throwing of darts at a balloon. That was the worst job I've ever had. Then I got promoted to the ducks in the trough. That was a plum job.
Really? That was an upgrade.
Yeah, because I lasted long enough to get the promotion. I lasted 4 weeks and got promoted.
I'm not seeing the differentiation of the building here. Where am I missing that?
Under the column heading sign location allowed, if you go down to sandwich board, it says within 10 feet of a customer entrance.
Customer entrance doesn't have to be a doorway. You
Correct.
don't have to have a building. You could have a sidewalk that leads to the park, which would be the customer entrance.
Yeah, I guess.
Right, that's exactly where I was
Oh,
going. Because I actually thought of customer entrance as driving in, as in a driveway,
Well, I think
or
of
as
it
in
as the
a,
sidewalk or the entrance at one
right,
place.
because
But you could enter the park if you're
Right.
within 10 feet of that, that's good enough.
Yes, so it should, I guess, thank you. Pedestrian entrance, I think, would.
Be better, so that a car driveway.
so it could be a car, it could be a person
Pedestrian
walking.
entrance is
good.
Because that same thing would apply, like, for instance, with, Christmas tree sales.
Mhm.
You know, they've got the signboard, you know, they've got the, up right now. That's definitely not, that close to the river. Okay. Are
Have
we
we ever
good?
decided about allowing sandwich boards? We've never really taken the temperature, have we?
Do we want to,
We did, because we talked
do
about
we
immaculate.
want to limit it to 5 sandwich? No, I'm only kidding.
I don't want any.
Anything else on the sandwich boards? Are we good on the sandwich boards?
Well, so we're not just going with within a given number of feet of the customer entrance, is that what?
Pedestrian entrance.
Yeah, we're saying that the entrance that could apply to a building, it could apply to a car, it could apply to somebody walking on a sidewalk. But it's an entrance to whatever area they're in, right?
I was thinking it should say to the customer pedestrian
Right.
entrance, so it isn't a driveway.
Keeps it out of the driveway.
Yeah. So it can't be the entrance of a strip mall parking lot.
Right.
It
If
can't
you're
be.
walking, because then you're entering that business. That's the entrance into the property.
But the minute you get out of your car, you're a pedestrian.
Mm-hmm.
So if we say customer pedestrian entrance, you're saying it would not apply to a car?
Yeah, why do you say customer pedestrian? Why don't you say
Oh,
pedestrian
well,
entrance?
yeah. So pedestrian would mean it's
Wherever the foot
the
traffic
walking
initiates, so
entrance.
it's pedestrian oriented instead of automobile oriented.
But-
Otherwise, if
aren't
automobile
I-
oriented, you could put it right out along Monona Drive up and down.
But aren't I a pedestrian the minute I get out of my car?
Yes.
We'll have to work on, yes, I could see that point. So my understanding is
It's
you
rhetorical,
want this
right?
to apply to a doorway the customer would use to enter the building, or a sidewalk that a customer would use to enter a site.
And I guess my point about that is that we currently have a lot of temporary establishments for which there is not a building, and it would definitely not be within 10 feet of where they are, that is actually a vehicle entrance. That would apply to our vegetable and corn people that are up during the summer, and applies to the Christmas tree people right now.
And
In the
I'm
farmer's
aware-
market?
Right, farmer's
Right,
market.
Farmers market, night where IHM puts their fish fry, don't they have a sandwich board they still put up? Or maybe they don't, because it's on the other side, but and maybe they put it up on the Madison side of the drive. I just recall seeing one.
Yeah, we kind of ignore that, I think.
They put it up on our
So in the
side.
case of like the
Yeah.
vegetables or the Christmas
So-
trees or whatever, right now, Monona Drive, they're putting it close to where the cars or people are gonna turn in, because in
Right.
fact they are in, right?
Do those get temporary use permits from the city?
I don't think so.
That's a good question.
Not that I'm aware of.
I know there's for the tree scenario, I know we have a contract.
Do they get a vendor's permit?
I believe they need to get a vendor's permit.
So we could create an exemption for that if it's provided for in the vendor's permit.
Because that would also take care of many of our events in the parks. So any of our like races, the 20K, like all that stuff that has sandwich boards as part of the setup,
Right.
they could describe all of that in their
Special
vendor
events.
permit. Yeah.
Give that a shot.
Yeah. There's a lot more of them than we think. I mean, really, because when,
Yeah,
like
there
you
are.
said, all the
Think of all
special events,
those.
I mean, 4th of July, there's all kinds of sandwich boards. Right.
All those cops put up those sandwich boards,
Yeah.
telling me where I could park and not.
And Chad makes.
Anything else on the sandwich board for clarification? He's laughing.
I sorry.
So, I have a question.
Yes.
Any durable all-weather material? Does that mean plastic? Is that,
Yes.
that's durable all-weather material? Okay.
And I assume somewhere in there, in here, it's referencing that it can't limit the accessibility.
For the sandwich boards.
Where would that be?
Yeah, and we have that in the code now generally, but I think calling it out specifically for these temporary signs would be prudent.
Because if we're having a sidewalk and they've limited it down to a small width, and then we have an accessibility issue, then
Anything else on the signboard front? So what we've agreed to, could you guys sort of read it back to us, if you will, what the changes that you're gonna make, just to make sure we're all on the same page?
I've got a good list here.
Okay.
So from the start of tonight's meeting, for the yard signs, we'll limit them to no off-premise signs, and we'll clarify that a service being offered or provided on a site is on premise.
Okay.
Political signs, keep as we've got it drafted now. Flag signs, 3 flags, 60 square feet, and setback to match the setbacks for monument signs. And no limit on federal highways. What triggers the sign coming into conformance? We'll clarify that limits can be provided through a conditional use permit or a plan development. Any modification of the sign structure triggers conformance, and we'll explore the idea of a financial investment in this site, either percentage or flat number. Can we legally apply that kind of trigger event? And then for the temporary signs, we'll make sure that all temporary signs are not allowed to impede pedestrian or traffic accessibility. And
Yeah, the other, the sandwich board vendor permit exemption, and then, yeah, the limit of accessibility, and then creating the within 10 feet of the pedestrian entrance clarification on that.
I think And I'll let you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but I was thinking that we were on the one that relates to the conformance issue. We weren't necessarily saying that it should be a dollar amount. We were saying, we're doing that now, we want it to stay the same.
On the owner issue.
Right.
Well, that would be nice if we could. If we can't, we're saying any trigger we can possibly get, multiple triggers. So if we have a trigger for a zoning permit or a trigger for a dollar change, they're all good, because at least one of those triggers will come in. Anything that's legal to be able to come back and get rid of a grandfathered pylon sign.
Okay.
So if they can come up with multiple triggers, we already have to invest in the sign, but if it's a zoning permit that would trigger it, or a massive change in value on the property, or whatever is allowable, I would
Okay,
love it if it could still be a
okay.
change.
So
of ownership.
we want as many triggers as we can get
I
to make
think
sure
that's the
that if there is a
message
shift.
How many triggers can we have?
Okay, okay,
Because it's a clear community consensus
Yep.
for a standard. It's just a matter of,
yeah.
how long's long enough? 30 years to own it, 60 years? When have you gotten your value out of that sign?
Right.
When is the grandfathered value extinguished?
Supreme Court says 15 years.
Well, there we go. There isn't a sign that's been approved in the last 30. So
Then you would
tell
have
Bill
to
that.
adopt an
Tell Bill that.
amortization.
Okay, great. Anything else? Yes.
Could I ask a couple quick general questions?
You may.
If we're done, are we done with your formal stuff?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. My question, starting on page 1, definition of a sign, it says visible from outdoors. So my question would be, and then again, when you go into page 2, it talks about it again. The Walgreens sign I always talk about, where we limit signage, and then so they create an upper area of all glass, and then inside the building by 4 feet have a sign that clearly is only visible from outside. Would that be disallowed by this ordinance?
It would be legal by this ordinance.
Why?
Because it's visible from outside.
So then it would fall under our sign ordinance.
Oh.
Because they got it not included, because they got extra signage because they built the big glass vestibule
Yes.
and put this back behind it, so that's not a building sign.
Yeah, we wrote this to address that.
Okay, just a question for commission then, that happens.
So decals in your windows now?
No, that's different.
Right above the entrance.
If you look at the entrance, they have a glass vestibule, or whatever you call it, up high, and then back on the wall behind that, maybe 4 feet behind it, they have another sign, because we wouldn't allow the pharmacy sign on the building, so they put the pharmacy sign there, which clearly to let people know driving by about the pharmacy. So it was a way to get around the sign code and the maximum square footage of signage you're allowed. So this would stop that, so at least we'd have to talk about it.
What if you put the sign inside the store?
It is inside the store, but it says it's clearly to be visible from outside. If it's inside the store for customers, that's different.
The decals on windows?
That's addressed separately, 50% of each
Oh,
pane.
yeah, you're right, yep.
Yeah. Okay. Question on page 2, monument signs. You said the bottom edge is typically located 3 feet from the grade. We only allow 5-foot total height. So that means that's only 2 foot of signage. I would say most of the signs that come here, the bottom's much closer to the grade. I'm wondering where that 3 feet came from.
Yeah, should we say that there's a base on grade and the monument sign is attached to the base?
I would say it'd be more likely typically within a foot of grade. Isn't it, the bottom of the signs that we see and approve?
Do we care?
Yeah, do we care if it's?
Or should there be anything in there? But by saying that, that makes me think that it should be up higher, and I don't think we're asking them to put it up higher.
Correct.
It's gonna be up to them with the landscape that we require in front of it.
Right, but when you say it's typically 3 feet above grade, we have a lot of signs that go right down to grade.
Although that was.
On page 2, A1A, the last sentence under monument sign at the very end.
Landscaping, but it blocks the sign.
See it there? Okay.
Standard.
Sorry?
Yeah, I think we could change that to 1 foot.
Yeah.
Or eliminate it, not tell them where the
Eliminate it or
bottom
eliminate
is.
it.
Yes,
Wouldn't that be more like what we're
think
talking
that would
about?
just
You come in and
eliminate it
propose a sign.
right.
Yeah, no, I think that
Okay.
it was just an added clarification probably from another place.
Probably. Okay, page 3, C3, 3 and 4, we're telling them what a minimum size. It has to be 4 foot deep and 16 feet wide minimum to be able to put in a marquee sign. And the letters have to be at least 10 inches tall. That's odd that we're telling them it has to be a minimum size, that we want that size or bigger. Where'd that come from?
That came from a standard definition of a marquee sign. And the notion there is that you'll be able to read the marquee from the street. And if you wanted to take that out, I think that would be fine.
It seems odd that we're telling somebody the minimum size they can make a sign.
What do other people think?
Take it out.
Take it out? Take it out?
Take it out.
They might have a facade that doesn't even allow that big of a sign, and they want that type of sign.
So you wanted 3 in, 4 out, you wanted the letter size though, too.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure we need to tell them a minimum letter size.
You'd assume they'd want to make it legible, so.
Right, and a marquee sign may be that big, but I don't know. What does it help to tell them a minimum size?
Yeah, I think you've got a good point.
Okay. On page 4, temporary business signs, that's B, in the highlighted part, it says business signs do not require a sign permit. But then in a subsection on page 5, when you get down to 3A, we have active building or plat sign, and it talks about approved development sign. So we're talking about they don't need a permit, but then a subsection says they do need a permit. So I'm wondering if that has to be changed to somewhere else, if that needs a permit, or I don't think you can have a heading that says these signs aren't permitted and then have a sign that requires a permit within that heading. It seems odd, at least.
I see the conflict. I think the
Mhm.
intent for these temporary signs was to not get a permit.
But then why do we have a temporary approved development sign that is made? So then that should be under some other category, at least not under this subsection B, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I think it's fine, it's just, it's a conflict to have it under the other heading. Okay, on that same page, permanent miscellaneous signs. We talk about regardless of the land use, which is only permitted on sites used for municipal buildings or academic facilities located within retail, business, community district, commercial zoning, blah, blah, blah. Well, some of those buildings that you're talking about are in residential districts. So I'm wondering why we're excluding a residential district from that. We have a number of schools that are in residential districts. We have churches that are in residential districts. I'm on page 5C,
Yeah.
under the main heading.
Is it just the districts, or is it the academic facility?
You know, it's the districts I'm asking about, because a lot of our academic facilities are in residential districts.
I think this originally stemmed from a conversation we had over the summer in that smaller group, and either we captured it wrong and have been going wrong with it, or we had this discussion and.
I think you captured it wrong. What we talked about was within those signs, we weren't going to allow electronic message board in a residential district, but we'd still allow them to have a sign, and even, for example, Maywood School or Nuestro Mundo, they have a sign there, it's a changeable message, it's just not illuminated. Winnequa School could possibly have something like that. So I don't think we want to eliminate those institutions from the ability to have a miscellaneous sign just because they're in a residential district. That's typically where they are.
Right, we just wanted to prohibit the electronic message.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
And I believe that was our discussion.
Yep, that sounds right.
Okay. Again, on page 11, under electronic messaging sign, they are, in addition to setbacks, they're not allowed if it's visible from any property within single-family, two-family, or multifamily zoning district. I would argue multifamily zoning district, I understand that, but will we ever change some of these on Monona Drive where we have just the apartments? Is that still CBD, or will that be rezoned to multifamily? Because there are electronic message signs allowed on Monona Drive, and as we redevelop Monona Drive, I could see the multifamily district being where you could see one of these electronic message boards. So I don't know that that we should have multifamily zoning district in that prohibition. And then on that same page, under the fuel price signs, we're allowing them to have changeable copy, but the way this is written, they can't have electronic changeable copy. I believe we've already allowed that, and I'm wondering why we would not allow them to change it with the technology today to have it electronic change, not just manual, because there are going to be very few people that want to go in there and put up letters in the middle of winter around here.
I agree.
And so I'm thinking for that, I don't know if there's a way we can regulate that differently. We don't want it to change every 10 seconds like our other one, but it could be changed once a day or whenever the fuel messages are supposed to be changed. Is there a way to write that?
As the prices change.
Right.
Yeah, but they don't
There is,
change them 3
because
times a
the
day.
statutes consider these signs as an individual thing, so we can.
Okay, so I think we should allow them to be electronic because that's
Yes,
certainly the way
definitely.
all the new ones, I think we allow, isn't PDQ electronic? The new one? I think it is, and I think Super America is electronic. So I think we don't want to exclude that, we just don't want it to be flashing or scrolling or things like that. Sorry, and then on page 14, which is the permanent miscellaneous sign group, I believe this came to me under A, city required sign category. Under the sign permit and approver, we were talking, what I was talking about was on-site directional signage. That's usually within our conditional use permit, and it's something Plan Commission looks at. I don't think our intent was for Plan Commission to look at address signs or building identification or management signs. I don't think if you want to put an address sign up on your building, you have to come to Plan Commission.
Right.
So what happened is it all changed to PC, and I think we're talking about the directional signage.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks for catching that.
Okay, great,
That's it for me.
thank you.
You have.
Anybody else have anything else they want changed? Questions about as it relates to this latest iteration?
So, to wrap up, I guess I will say thank you guys for putting so much thought into this and crafting it and customizing it to make it the best fit for Monona. We will be scheduling, I'll be working with Jared to schedule the public open house. Obviously, you'll all be invited, and we'll try to get it out through the typical channels of public notice. And we will shoot for that mid-January, somewhere around that time. And then hopefully come back here in February to pursue a recommendation of the plan, or of the ordinance, and then it would move on to common council from that point on. So that's kind of our brief timeline.
Yeah.
Will this be like a formal presentation for the public hearing, or is it just come and stop by and just wander around and talk to people, or how will it be?
I think we should have one or two, well, we've got an hour, so I think we should have a formal presentation about 15 minutes.
I would agree. So then would it be appropriate to, we've only been having about one plan commission meeting a month. Would it be, have another plan commission meeting, have a formal meeting, present it during that, and then questions could be asked, or would that be too formal?
Following the public meeting?
No,
In-
convene plan commission,
An
you give a
alternative of
presentation,
Have the public meeting as a part of.
a public hearing at plan commission. And that would be the only agenda item for that night.
Rather than having a whole separate, yet another thing to add to our calendars, is saying, can we do both?
Yeah, would you want it on your regular plan commission night or on the night that we've?
I don't think the night matters, does it? And I don't know if it should be done that way. It's just a question that,
Yeah, no, if we don't have a lot of other things on it, again, I mean, I don't see any reason why we couldn't combine both.
I think there's a great benefit in you hearing the same questions and comments as we gather at the public meeting.
I do
Right.
too.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
You can-
The only kind of counter I have to that is what you mentioned, the formality of it.
Mhm.
Is some people don't feel that comfortable in a setting like this where they would in maybe strolling in for 10 minutes
Okay.
and looking at some boards and kind of doing.
And would that
things there.
inhibit people from speaking about it?
Yeah, we would have to obviously offer several different ways of commenting, whereas we wouldn't necessarily all just be verbal. You could have written comments, you could email us afterwards, things along those lines. Offer people the ability who may not want to speak up in front of everyone to comment, yeah.
Well, I had reserved the room at the community center, which we can change this if we decide to, thinking maybe if we put it in a more community space that's less formal.
Do we already
that
know
we
what
can
day it
have
is?
Discussion. We've
You
got
keep
it down
saying
to,
sometime in mid-February.
we've got it down to 2 dates, but there's been some cross
Yeah,
wires.
she emailed me one date this morning, and then we found out a different date this afternoon, so that's why I didn't have it confirmed. But January 15th is what you had said.
Yeah.
Which is what day of the week?
Tuesday.
Tuesday, sorry. I don't think.
And we're obviously scheduled for the 14th, so.
Yeah.
But there's nothing that I've received, and I would have to receive something by December 31st for there to be something on the agenda for the 14th. I don't expect there to be too much.
Would the
For the next-
14th work?
Well, we picked the 15th based off of your calendar availability
Ah.
and the room availability.
Well, this room's available
Yeah,
on the
it's a-
14th.
I
too.
think
That's true.
I'm,
That wasn't one of the dates that they had.
yeah,
provided,
no,
but
I
you
know.
could-
And I think, yeah, it depends on if you have to go to a different city's plan commission that night or not.
7 o'clock
Hmm.
would work.
Okay.
On the 14th?
Yeah.
Most people here have that blocked out.
Indeed.
Then are we talking about doing it here as opposed to the,
Yeah, we're talking about doing it
so
here.
that it's a more, I mean, do people have any thoughts on that about making it, that it's a more formal presentation for the, I mean, the people who want to speak up on it would be standing where you're standing to talk more than, is that?
We could structure this, so we could have a formal public hearing, we could all just get up and mull around with the participants too, and
It's
as
like
long as we
5
structure that
minutes.
into our meeting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was thinking the exact same
Or we
thing.
could
Like, we wouldn't
reconfigure-
start, if we had something in terms of formal meeting, we could start the formal meeting at 7:30, but plan on, having the public hearing portion for the first half hour.
If you
or
have
longer.
a meeting, if you call it a public meeting and not a public hearing,
Right,
it's less formal.
right.
So you can get up and wander around, so you call it a public meeting.
Yeah.
When you notice the item on the agenda, just call it a public meeting.
We can definitely structure it so that we can accommodate both.
And then when it comes back to us in February, we would notice it as a public hearing, so we do have a formal public hearing on it, instead of just at the end of the agenda for a discussion.
Mhm.
I'm not
Mhm.
expecting a lot of people would come again, but it would be nice to have a formal public hearing on it. in
Yeah.
place.
Will the new administrator be on board by the 14th?
Don't know yet.
It would be nice
It'll be
Yes.
close.
if they could come and.
It's gonna, yeah, it'll be close. We don't have an exact start date yet. So, we're working on that right now. It'll be close. And he may well be able to attend, anyway, certainly the public portion. There's no reason why he couldn't attend the public portion. Okay? Anything else on the sign code before we let these gents free?
No, I don't have anything unless, obviously, if you guys think of anything in the meantime, question or comment, anything like that, reach out to Sierra and she could funnel those comments our way. Otherwise, we look forward to seeing you guys a month from now, right here in this room.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Have a nice holiday.
You too. That's not
Okay. Potential upcoming items. Corey, nothing. Nothing. Okay. Upcoming meetings, December 24th, were obviously canceled. January 14th, we just decided. January 28th, we're in as tentative, depending on what comes in January, right? Any requests for information regarding development projects? Or other information? No other information?
Anybody know who's interested in the White Horse property?
No?
You don't think it'll be a hotel?
In the back? I don't think so. I'm thinking of maybe oil change.
Okay. There being no other information requested, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Adjournment.
Do I have a second?
I have no idea.
Second by Rob.
Okay.
Third.
All right, all those in favor? Thank you.